My life has been very difficult, especially over the last year. I have faced trauma I never expected, and I've had to do it practically without any support. I have finally brought myself to a better place mentally and emotionally, and now all that progress has come crashing down. I don't know what to do. I, female 27, have had a strained relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. I have a twin sister, Talia, and it had been clear early on that she was the golden child. I don't know how this happens with a pair of twins, but here we are. I always believe that the golden child is either an overachiever, shares similar interests with the parents, or is somehow different in a positive way from other children in the house. But in this case, Talia and I were mirror images of each other. We had the same interests, we both did well in school, everything was similar. So I could not, for the life of me, understand why my parents loved her more, because they did. They used to try and hide it initially, but I always felt this way even as a kid. I remember breaking down one day and telling them that I felt overlooked and unloved, but nothing changed. He was always Talia first, Talia over everyone and everything else. The favoritism was subtle at first. If they got us toys or clothes, Talia got the first pick. Even if these things were identical, they were not always the same color, and Talia always made the choice. I had to just make do with whatever she decided wasn't worth her time or something she didn't like. If I protested, I got lectures about how I was being selfish, about how the gifts were the same anyway, and about how I'd never get far in life if I acted so entitled. Then gradually it got worse. Talia enjoyed the attention and pampering, and I hated her for it. So we were never close. This rift between us widened in middle school when she isolated herself from our friend group and started hanging out with the cool kids. In a way, that was better for me because I could now at least have my friends to myself and live in peace at school. Initially, our friends were shocked at her sudden change, but they grew accustomed to it, and my friendship with them grew stronger throughout middle and high school. The rift between Talia and me kept widening. By the time we graduated, we had completely different interests and distinct social circles. This worked for me because it meant less interaction with her. She was still mean, especially in school because she wanted to look cool for her peers, but I was very used to her, so it never fazed me anyway. It was at the end of school that things between us escalated to levels I will never recover from, and I haven't been in contact with her since. I worked very hard on my college applications because I knew what I wanted to do, plus almost all my friends wanted to go to good places and do well for themselves. I hadn't known about Talia's preparation for her essays, and I wasn't nosy, so I never asked. But she looked way too confident about her admissions for someone who wasn't prepared or at least didn't know what to do. To my dismay, she got in, and I didn't. Long story short, I found out in the nick of time that she had stolen my essay and submitted it. I was furious and didn't want to tell my parents because, as always, they would have said that I needed to suck it up and that now nothing could be done. I was done being nice and trampled on. I decided to go nuclear. I emailed the university with details about her plagiarism, showing them how this work was mine. I also told them about the situation at home and requested them to be mindful if and when they responded to her. Well, they did, and they blacklisted her, citing that they had found that she engaged in plagiarism during her application. When she got the email, she sat in disbelief and looked at me with such hate. I thought I would collapse, but she couldn't admit anything to Mom and Dad. What could she have said? That she stole my essay? I knew I had caught her in a bad position, and I was more than elated that she was getting her due. The situation was tense and hilarious, at least for me. I knew what she had done, and she knew what I had done, and I didn't want to go to Mom and Dad for resolution, and she couldn't go because that would mean admitting she stole my work. Unfortunately for her, Mom and Dad were heartbroken by this injustice. They were sure they wanted to take it up with the university, insisting there was no plagiarism involved. It's here that things got messy. My parents sent the email, and what they got in return was a detailed reply about her application and the source she stole from my work. I foolishly hoped that when they saw what their precious daughter had done to me, they'd finally see her for who she was and maybe, just maybe, I would become an important part of the family. What happened was quite the opposite. I was yelled at for days for purposely ruining Talia's life and career. The moment they learned I was the one who reported the plagiarism, they found someone to hound, no matter that she stole my work, no matter that she was in the wrong, and no matter that it was because of her that I couldn't go. The only thing that mattered was that I outed her without consulting them. They called me every name in the book and said the right thing to do would have been to talk to them about it, and then they would have come up with a solution. I told them their only solution would have been to let her go scot-free, and I would have been asked to just suck it up and apply elsewhere. It was a mess at home, and no one was willing to see my perspective. It had become clear that no matter what I did, I'd be the black sheep, and no matter what Talia did, she would never face the consequences. The next few months were brutal, but I was just waiting for college. I knew that the minute I stepped out of the house, I wouldn't be coming back. There was nothing to come back to anyway, and that's what I did. I left for college and immediately went low contact with my parents and no contact with Talia. She was dead to me after her little stunt, and I didn't want anything to do with her ever again. College was a refreshing change. I made good friends, had a good life, worked hard. I met Matt in college, and we hit it off instantly. Matt and I were friends for a couple of years. He was my senior in college, but we shared the same friend circle. Right before he graduated, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes. He was one of my closest friends, and I was extremely happy in his company. So to me, the logical next step was a relationship. When I said yes, he told me he'd had a crush on me for years and had been trying to muster the courage to ask me out. I honestly thought this was adorable, and I told him I would have said yes even if he had asked me earlier. We had a good relationship for all it was worth. We were already very good friends, so we knew each other well. There was a level of comfort and honesty, and it just came naturally. I also told him about the entire situation with my family. I explained that I was extremely low contact with my parents and absolutely no contact with my sister. Nothing could ever make me talk to her again, and I asked him to respect that. He thought it was absurd that a family could be so dysfunctional, because his family is picture perfect. His parents are madly in love, he's the oldest of 4 siblings, and they are all close and supportive. My ordeal was alien to him. I respected that, and I respected and enjoyed the family dynamic he came from. It was honestly adorable. The love they shared was something I had always been deprived of, so I couldn't help but feel a little jealous. But I made it clear to him that he should never expect me to go back to my family and try to sort things out just because it was impossible for him to conceive of dysfunctional families. He seemed okay with it, which is why I trusted him. I never knew that this was going to end up being the worst time of my life. 2 years ago, when I was 25, Matt proposed. I obviously said yes. We had been dating for close to 4 years by then, and I was sure he was the guy I wanted to spend my life with. He introduced me to his family earlier, and they accepted me with open arms. I felt like I finally had a family. Even his siblings, 2 sisters and 1 brother, were extremely welcoming, and I developed independent relationships with each of them. It was like I had become a part of the family before I even married him. Marriage was the next step, and I was very, very happy with my relationship and the life I had built. We were supposed to get married last year. The entire year before that was spent planning for the wedding, the honeymoon, and everything else. It was a stressful time, and it was also a little challenging for our relationship because that's when I realized there were differences between us. Working through them required effort. Nonetheless, we pushed through willingly. We had one of our biggest fights while finalizing the guest list. I wanted a small, intimate wedding, but he had a lot of guests he wanted, his immediate family, some uncles, aunts, his siblings' partners, and others. I, on the other hand, had no family I wanted to invite. I wasn't close with anyone. I told him I would only be inviting my friends, and I honestly did not want my family anywhere near me on my wedding day. At first, he agreed, but I could see his hesitation. I asked him if there was a problem. He said no, so I dropped it. A week later, however, he came to me and said that I needed to invite my family because there would be no wedding without family present. I looked at him with wide eyes and told him I had always made it clear that my family wasn't a part of my life. They didn't even know I was engaged, and that the only 2 people needed for a wedding were the bride and groom. So there was no reason to be worked up about my parents not attending. He wouldn't back down. He said that whatever fight I had with them could be set aside for one day, and that he wasn't asking me to start a relationship with them or forgive them, just to invite them to the wedding. I told him that any invitation would mean I wanted to mend things, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. In hindsight, I should have left him right there. I could see that despite claiming to understand my reality in childhood, which I always was transparent about, he had chosen to throw this at me. But I was a fool in love. We fought a lot, and I almost stopped talking to him. But deep down, I knew we needed to reach a compromise. After a lot of back and forth, he finally told me why he insisted on inviting my family. He said he didn't want his family to think he was marrying a woman who didn't have a good relationship with her family. His family is very conservative that way. They have always lived with a family-first rule, and he felt that my parents' absence would reflect poorly. He didn't want that for me. At that time, I thought his thought process was caring and thoughtful, but I gradually realized how problematic it was. He was more worried about the impression his family would get, especially his extended family because his parents and siblings already knew I didn't get along well with mine, than about what it would do to me psychologically. The show was more important to him than his bride, and I should have seen that. I didn't, and I paid the price. After a lot of back and forth, I agreed to call my parents, but that was where I drew the line. I told him I would have them there, but no other family members, especially not Talia. There would be no father-daughter dance, and my family would not be allowed to give speeches. That was the only condition for inviting them, and he had to meet me halfway. Thankfully, he agreed, and he knew he didn't have much of a choice. I also warned him not to contact anyone on his own. Only I would call them up and invite them, and only when I felt the time was right. I knew if I gave them the information too early, they would make something up and get Talia to tag along, which I just couldn't agree to. And honestly, I also hoped that if I told them late enough, maybe they wouldn't be able to make it, so I would technically be in the right and still end up having my way. I think Matt suspected this, but even if he did, he didn't say anything. So that was that. I informed Mom and Dad 6 weeks before the wedding, and they said that obviously the entire family would be there to support me on my special day. I cut them off right there and told them that there was absolutely no way Talia was coming to my wedding. It was just the 2 of them invited, and if they tried to be sneaky and brought her anyway, I would escort them out myself. They tried protesting, saying it was the perfect time for the family to reunite and that I needed to stop being a baby and that I had had my revenge and should be satisfied. I told them this was my only contact with them before the wedding. They knew the venue and the time, and if they wanted to come, they could. However, if they tried anything, I wouldn't hesitate to take necessary steps. And I disconnected the call. I thought that was a stern enough warning to deter them from planning anything, but I was very wrong. And I should have known that Talia would turn up and make a mess of things. She did make a mess, but it was much bigger than I expected. A week before the wedding, my parents flew down and checked into a hotel. They had informed me that they'd come a week early, wanted to give me something, and wanted me to come along with Matt. I was reluctant because I didn't want all those feelings and angst resurfacing just a week before my wedding, but Matt said I should go and that he would come with me. And at the sight of any misbehavior, we'd walk out. That made me feel a little better, and we decided to go. To my surprise, but I'm sure many of you guessed it, Talia was there. This was what they wanted to give me, a chance for a heart-to-heart and a reconciliation. The moment I saw her, I wanted to get up and leave, but I somehow stayed frozen. I looked at Matt, and he sat down. Then they got to talking. It was all a load of bull crap, and honestly, I don't even remember what they said. I was just zoned out and mentally paralyzed. All I could see was an ambush. I think I snapped back to reality a few minutes later, and I got up, grabbed Matt, and told him we were leaving. He resisted. He said we should just sort this out, and I told him I was going and he was free to play happy families with them all he wanted. And I stormed off. I checked into a hotel and sent him a text that I was there. And would talk when I felt better. Then, I switched off my phone. I think I drowned an entire bottle of wine, and I woke up feeling dizzy the next day. I turned my phone back on, expecting at least a few texts, but there was nothing. Matt hadn't reached out to me. It felt weird because he generally isn't the kind to give me space. He likes to resolve issues instantly. I waited a few more hours to see if he'd text, but he hadn't. I called him that night, and my call went to voicemail. He had ghosted me a week before the wedding. I still don't have it in me to recount what happened in those 7 days, but I knew the wedding was off. He was completely unresponsive, and he wasn't talking to his family either. Nobody knew what was up with him. It was like he had vanished. So, I called the caterers and everyone else and told them the wedding was off. I blocked him on the day of our wedding and stayed with a friend until I sorted my stuff. 2 months later, I found out he had married Talia on the same day he was supposed to marry me. It was outrageous. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I just couldn't understand how something like this happened and why he would behave like an a-hole and end up marrying my sister, whom he had met just a week ago. It made no sense to me. I was a mess when I found out. It felt like she had won again, and there was nothing I could do. It was just horrible, and I was in one of the darkest phases of my life. I had to rebuild myself emotionally from scratch, and it took every ounce of strength not to keep tabs on them. I was doing better, much better, and then yesterday I got a call from Matt's mother, Nancy. She said she wanted to meet me. I don't want to meet her. I don't want anything to do with them anymore, but I just cannot go through this again. She was in tears, begging me to meet her one last time, and I don't know what to do. I have never seen her this way, and maybe meeting her will help me get some closure. But I don't want all my progress to shatter. I feel so helpless right now, and I need advice. Update 1. I read all your comments and decided to go and meet her. It was therapeutic and saddening at the same time, but I finally learned what had really happened. After I left, she told me that after I stormed off, my parents and Talia fed Matt some story about my childhood and why I was no contact. And the worst part is that he believed them. He believed every single word, which is why he didn't reach out to me for days. After she said he was in too much of a mess to think rationally, I had called the caterers and decorators and canceled everything. He received confirmation calls from them and panicked. He thought I was canceling the wedding, and in some twisted way, he took that as confirmation of me being in the wrong and believed whatever my parents told him. Nancy said Matt was a mess after finding out and that he stupidly went to my parents for advice. They suggested he could marry Talia for the ceremony so he wouldn't be ridiculed by his family, and then Talia and he could get the marriage annulled or divorced once the fuss died down. Nancy said the entire family was against this stupid decision and kept telling him that canceling the wedding was better than marrying my twin. But he seemed to lose all sense. He went ahead with the plan because he didn't want to deal with the shame of being left at the altar. And ever since, Talia has refused to divorce him. She's been dragging the marriage along, saying she won't divorce him, and if she does, she'll demand a hefty alimony. It's a train wreck through and through, and Matt had no choice but to continue. But a few days ago, things changed. Talia, in a drunken state, told Matt the truth about everything, how they had trapped him and how foolish he had been. She also revealed the essay she stole from me, admitting that everything they told him about me was a lie. Matt has been depressed since then. He hasn't gone home, hasn't picked up her calls or anyone else's for that matter, and only 2 days ago did Nancy finally get hold of him. He's devastated. He told Nancy he made the biggest mistake of his life and had no idea how he could ever apologize to me. He said it serves him right because of how he broke my heart. But he said all he wanted was a chance to talk to me so that he could explain his side and we could then see what to do. I looked at Nancy with wide eyes. When I told her that there was absolutely no we between Matt and me anymore and that he was delusional if he thought otherwise, she cried. I told her I was not open to talking to him at all. He dug his own grave, and he can lie in it. He's my sister's husband now, and whatever the circumstances of their marriage, I was not going to intrude or help him. Nancy cried when I said this and begged me to reconsider, but I told her my decision was final. I wasn't up for this, and nothing could change that. I've left that part of my life behind. I don't know if I should reopen it again. She kept insisting I talk to him just once and then decide, but I told her I would think about it and left. It was also overwhelming, and she has texted me a few times since, but I haven't responded. I don't know what to do. I just can't deal with all this anymore. I don't have it in me to get back into that mess again. Update 2. I've been a mess these past few days, so I apologize for the late update. This will be my final update. Nothing dramatic happened, if that's what you were expecting. I decided against meeting Matt for the sake of my mental health. I told Nancy that while I was sorry for what happened, Matt deserved it for believing strangers over me and choosing to protect his reputation rather than talk things out. I told her I was in a much worse position a year ago, with nobody to help. I had no parents to cry to or who would check on me. Matt has that luxury, and he doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I didn't wait for her reply and I blocked her because I don't want her guilt-tripping me anymore. I know it makes me seem brutal and heartless, not helping him out, but I can't help but feel it's karma coming back to him. I was alone too, with no one, and I had to pick up all my pieces myself. It's only fair that he gets to feel this too. I hope they don't reach out again, but I have a feeling they will. However, I know for sure that I won't respond to any text from them. Whether he stays in that marriage or goes forward with a divorce, it's honestly between him and his wife. I have no love for either of them anymore. This is it for me, and I think I've now got some closure because I can see how it has devastated him to no end. At least it will help me sleep better at night knowing he realizes what he has done and what he has lost, just because he couldn't bear being the center of gossip for a while. That's what you get for being stupid, I guess.